It's another particularly windy day, but yesterday was a glorious day for the people of Scotland and moreover a victory for common sense, because the Scottish First Minister, Humza Yousaf, announced he will be standing down from the position once a replacement has been found, in a political shit show that's entirely of his own creation. This is the equivalent of a man tying his own shoelaces together and then acting surprised when he falls over. I confess I'm not entirely up to speed when it comes to Scottish politics, so if you're watching this north of the border, I apologise in advance for any mistakes I make. And if you're watching this from outside the UK, I will try and explain as I go along. So, Humza Yousaf's party, the SNP, the Scottish National Party, after failing to win an outright majority, had entered into a power-sharing coalition with the Scottish Green Party, and the Scottish Greens are even madder than the ones we have in England. Then a few days ago, Mr Yousaf decided that coalition was no longer necessary and collapsed it. Now this pissed off the Green politicians and allowed the Scottish Conservative and Labour parties to file for motions of no confidence in both the SNP and in Mr Yousaf himself. But with arrogance that typifies the man, he swore he was not going to stand down. This is him at midday yesterday.
Therefore, after spending the weekend reflecting on what is best for my party, for the government and for the country I lead, I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm. I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader and ask that she commences a leadership contest for my replacement as soon as possible.
In its entirety, that speech is around 8 to 10 minutes long. And he said in it that he'd considered his position over the weekend and decided to stand down. Now, we know that's a lie. Firstly, because it came out of his mouth, and secondly, because it was leaked that yesterday morning he was frantically ringing around his own MPs, or rather MSPs, members of the Scottish Parliament, looking for their support. But it transpires they'd had enough of him as well. And not only has he been an ineffective leader, he's also an ineffective politician, because when the news broke, news teams went to his constituency in Glasgow and interviewed people about the news. Most of them didn't know he was their MP. To be fair, Mr Yousaf did achieve a couple of firsts. He's the first person of colour to be First Minister of Scotland, and he's the first Muslim to be the head of any British political party. But I have to be careful how I word this. The cynical among us suspect those qualities may have had more to do with why he was appointed First Minister than anything else, because God knows he didn't get it on merit, and he's shown he's woefully underqualified to do the job. It appears to have been a frantic box-ticking exercise to distract away from the turmoil going on in the Scottish Parliament. But then Mr Yousaf aired his own views on this in the now infamous White speech.
The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The Head of the Law Society, white. The Head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every Prison Governor, white. And not just Justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
I'll carry it on for him. The surrender flag he's now waving, white. The paper on which he's written his resignation, white. The race of the person who'll replace him as First Minister, white. Now, he is only 39 years old. I feel fantastic about myself now. Some people have said there's nothing racially charged about that speech, but we all saw it. We could see and hear the anger. And the bizarre thing is, his complaining about so many of the top jobs in Scotland going to white people doesn't appear to take into account that in Scotland, 96% of the population are white. He doesn't mention that the most powerful role in Scotland, First Minister, is held by someone who isn't white. Him. And his 13 months in office has mainly been him trying to stir up racial tension, which is a remarkable achievement when only 4% of the population aren't the same colour as me. Of course, in Scotland, traditionally, it was all falling out between the Catholics and the Protestants, although I have to say, in Scotland, they didn't do it with the enthusiasm that they did in Northern Ireland. So what's his legacy? I don't have exact figures, but since our friend Humza became First Minister of Scotland, hospital waiting times have increased. There's also been an increase in violent crime and sex offences and an increase in drug-related deaths. Now, Scotland has always had a disproportionate problem with drugs compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. But with Mr. Youssef at the helm, things are a little more complicated. You see, there have been allegations, and I stress allegations, I'm not stating this as fact, that Humza Yousef's brother-in-law may or may not be a very large player in the illegal Scottish narcotics industry. Those are allegations, but he has been arrested and charged with extortion and abduction relating to a man who died after falling out of a window. So, the brother of the wife of the Scottish First Minister, and we can presume these people all met up for Ramadan and Eid together, may or may not be a violent career criminal. That's not a good look. I was going to say met up for Christmas, but yeah, that wouldn't happen. A couple of other historic gaffes from Mr. Youssef. Upon meeting a group of female Ukrainian refugees in Scotland, he asked, "Where are all the men?" They're fighting the Russians, aren't they? And also, when he was Transport Minister, he was fined for driving without insurance. The Transport Minister didn't insure his own car. Although, to be fair to Mr. Youssef, out of the last 3 First Ministers, he's the only one who hasn't been arrested in relation to a serious crime. Alex Salmond, who now runs his own political party, who used to be head of the SNP, was recently cleared of all charges relating to sexual misconduct with 9 different women, although it transpires that may have been a plot from the supporters of Nicola Sturgeon, who was the First Minister that Youssef took over from, after she had to step down, after she and her husband were arrested, and her husband has been charged with embezzlement. So when the poison dwarf was running Scotland, he was skimming money off the government. Today is the last day of April, but on the 1st of April, that was when Humza Yousef's most controversial bill, the Hate Crime Act, came into force. I did an entire video on that, but I'll briefly recap, although people are already saying it should be repealed. Basically, this bill attempts to make Scotland be more like the Soviet Union in the 1960s, with the police acting like the fucking KGB. So, under the legislation, if you live in Scotland, and if you don't, just pretend for a bit, think about shortbread and whiskey. And I say that because last year I was in Edinburgh, and if you didn't know any better, when you visit the Scottish capital, you could be forgiven for thinking that's all that Scotland produces. You can buy virtually nothing else, unless you want to do some stereotypes and nip into a takeaway for some deep-fried heroin. Under the legislation, imagine you're having dinner inside your own home. I'm of the opinion that, provided you're not being overly provocative or suggesting violence, you can pretty much say whatever you like in your own home. But, under the legislation, let's say one of your guests takes something you say as to be offensive or hateful, and it could be they didn't understand the nuance or they're just too fucking thick to get you were joking. They can then report you to the police, and crucially, the police don't have to charge you. They don't even have to arrest you, but they can put your name on a register, and that register is available to employers. So, if you made a joke at a dinner party that didn't land, in 6 months' time, you could be passed over for promotion, or even worse. But it gets even crazier, because, hypothetically, if I said something in one of my videos which was offensive or hateful, and I say a lot of things which people can take as offensive or hateful, if someone in Scotland gets upset by something I've said, Theoretically, they could report me to the Scottish police, meaning that the next time I go north of the border, I could be arrested and charged under Scottish hate crime law, even though the thing I said was in England, where that law does not exist. Thankfully, though, it backfired spectacularly, because one person received far more complaints than anyone else under the new hate crime legislation. Humza Yousaf. To date, there have been over 1,800 complaints against the soon-to-be former First Minister using his own legislation. Because it turns out, if you're going to force through draconian laws that allow citizens to report people to the police anonymously, it's probably best if you don't record a speech essentially slagging off 96% of the population. But why does any of this matter? I'm English, it doesn't affect me. But Scotland is a beautiful country, and speaking as a fellow Brit, the people of Scotland deserve better than an incompetent, bigoted racist. There's quite a famous clip of Humza Yousaf before he became First Minister. And seeing it baffles me as to why the SNP thought, yes, that's the man we want to run not only the party, but the country. It provides a perfect visual metaphor for what he's done to his own political career. I don't usually touch on politics on this channel, but given that this year there are elections all over the world, I'm tempted to touch the really big topic, illegal immigration. That could get me in trouble. Please leave a comment with your opinion on that. And on that, that's the end of this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you could comment, that really helps the algorithm. And as ever, thanks for watching. Today is a good day. First fucking line. Totally up to speed with Scottish politics. So for anyone, fuck it. Speed with Scottish politics. So for any of my people, I've fucking done it again. Milk, white. Clouds, white. Cotton wool, white. Sheep, white. The colour of the bedroom ceiling, white. So what's his legacy? Pretty much sod all. His legacy. Now, I don't have the exact... Oh, great, the wind's back.